folks? Brian Bledsoe with you here once again for your July weather update, and I have some interesting things to show you during the course of this video here. Obviously, I hope every video that I do with you guys has interesting content, but some of the changes going on in this particular update, I think you are going to find somewhat useful. And as I do, also interesting and kind of projecting where we're going. So let's get started today, looking at rainfall percent of normal over the past 30 days. And you can see a large part of the region is still struggling in terms of getting moisture. Now, southeast Kansas has been dry. Eastern Oklahoma has been dry until recently, obviously, when we had the remnants of Hurricane Beryl that was making its way up there. North central Texas has been a little bit on the dry side, and then obviously out in West Texas. Now, there have been some wet areas. Southwest Kansas has had plenty of water, even down to the Oklahoma Panhandle. South Central and Southeast Texas also has done fairly well, courtesy of what was Beryl that helped things out a little bit. But in this regional landscape that you're looking right here, there are still an awful lot of have-nots versus the haves that we've been seeing over the past 30 days or so. And hopefully we can kind of massage this pattern a little bit and kind of get back on track just a little bit. I think we will for some folks, but bottom line, folks, there's still going to be, and I'm afraid, a lot of areas that are still going to likely end up a little bit on the drier side of things. I know that that's just kind of how we roll this time of year, and it's the stuff that we have to deal with, but I'll do my best to kind of show you where I think we might have some moisture and where things might be a little bit tough over the next few months or so. This is the upper level weather pattern really across the country for the next 14 days. And I think it's important to show the wide view because if you look out in the western United States, right around the four corners, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, you see that circle right there. And that is the core of a big ridge of upper level high pressure that has been largely controlling the western United States over the past little while and is likely going to be a significant influence over the western half of the country over the next not just 14 days, but I think even farther out. The interesting thing about this is that the farther east you go, you're on the eastern side of the ridge, we will get some better rain chances kind of work their way down because occasionally there will be a cold front that comes through and will at least start to spark off some thunderstorm chances. The farther west you go, underneath the core of that ridge, that's where the hottest temperatures are going to be. That's where overall I think the driest weather is going to be. So whether you're in West Texas, East Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and farther north, the fact that you're not underneath the core of that ridge is a good thing. Because areas farther west, I think, are going to struggle and struggle pretty mightily in the overall grand scheme of things going forward over the next couple of months or so. The rainfall anomaly forecast over the next 14 days, and this is one of those points that I was making. You could see basically most of Kansas is likely going to be drier than average. Northwest Texas a little bit drier than average, but a lot of that green you see there on the map across South Central and Southwest Texas is tied to one thing, and that is a little area of low pressure that makes its way up out of Mexico. At this time, some of the computer models are split on whether or not that's going to have a big impact. This is from the Euro Ensemble model, so it averages out all the members and gives you kind of the best guess as far as what the forecast is going to be. My gut says is that the farther south and southwest you go, you're probably going to see better moisture out of this. The farther north you go, you're probably going to get shorted, and that's why we obviously have some pretty stout dry anomalies extending from eastern Colorado across the majority of Kansas. If we look at the temperature profile, this takes you from July 12th through the 19th. And again, we're looking at anomalies here. And you can see that the farther south and southwest you go, you see those cool anomalies in southwest Texas, down into northern Mexico. The farther north you go, that's where you're running into some of those anomalies that are obviously going to be warmer than average. In fact, all of Kansas and Oklahoma likely going to end up warmer than average out of this deal. Areas farther south and southwest, you might get a little bit of a break. And then if we fast forward things from the 19th of July to the 26th, you see some of those anomalies actually expand eastward. Most of Oklahoma is average to cooler than average. Arkansas, southern Missouri, East Texas, looking that way, but northern Kansas likely still warmer than average, and the core of that warmth is displaced farther to the west and northwest. So most of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico likely end up warmer than average. And those warm anomalies extend even farther northwest, even right up the spine of the Rockies into Montana and into the Pacific Northwest. Again, that is from the 19th through the 26th. Overall, this is forecast rainfall anomalies for the next month and a half. All right. So the farther west you go, obviously the chances of you being drier than average, West Texas, eastern New Mexico, the Panhandle region, and then northward on up into parts of Kansas and the Midwest, probably going to end up drier than average out of this deal. And I'm taking all tropical activity off the table here, okay? Because it's very difficult to project something happens in terms of, a tropical storm, depression, or even a hurricane. But I think that's the flavor of this forecast. The farther north and northwest you go, likely drier than average. The farther east and southeast you go, your chances of at least being average to above average are better. Warmer than average, again, I think is going to be the rule over the next month and a half. That's why you see it kind of bullseye there across Nebraska, eastern Colorado, Kansas, down into Oklahoma and far north Texas. The farther south you go, you'll have some cool anomalies. And then the farther southeast you go, the chances of at least more frequent rainfall that could possibly be tied to some tropical waves and whatnot. But again, the theme is the farther north and northwest you go, that's where those stouter dry anomalies will be, and the more stout warm anomalies are likely going to be. Let's broaden the scope here a little bit. Let's look at the sea surface temperature anomaly forecast, because some of you have been asking, are we going to La Nina or not with this setup? And the Euro seasonal model, which you're looking at right here, takes the sea surface temperature anomalies out to January. And if you're watching off the west coast of South America, you see we start with some of that blue or the cool anomalies, and then they basically just kind of disappear. And that's an interesting development because this is the first run of the Euro seasonal model that has not had a La Nina event taking shape late this summer through the fall and winter. It kind of leaves us just in the neutral category right there. That being said, the NMME model, which you're going to look at right here, does not. Now, it has walked back the intensity and the early onset of La Nina, but this forecast runs from August through March on the NMME model. It still forecasts a La Nina to develop, and it still forecasts it to persist at least into the early third, if you will, of 2025. A sidebar to that is whether or not a La Nina forms here, okay? I want you to look at that blue shaded area from the Gulf of Alaska down the west coast of North America. That cool horseshoe, if you will, right there is still very indicative of a cold or negative PDO. In fact, the June reading of the PDO was at a -3. It's really tough to find in history when we've had a PDO this negative or cold where a La Nina event hasn't followed suit. Okay, so I'm not saying that the Euro is wrong. In fact, the Euro has actually been doing the best with this El Nino to La Nina type of transition. So I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just simply saying we need maybe a little more time to figure out if there's actually some teeth to that forecast or if the NMME model is still on track. That's something that I hope to resolve at least within the next month, but certainly as we wrap up summer and go into fall, we should have a very good idea. So with that in mind, let's look at the next 3 months here. We'll start with the Euro seasonal model. Where the brown is, that's where it's drier than average. Where the green is, that's where it's likely to be wetter than average, okay? So again, keep in mind, the anomaly doesn't say it's going to rain or it's not going to rain. The anomaly simply means the higher likelihood where the green is that there will be wetter than average conditions. The brown, obviously drier than average. So you can see that right there. For September, I think that green that's showing up there along the Texas Gulf Coast is likely tied to the tropical activity that's either going to roll in from the Atlantic or pop up in the Gulf of Mexico. And it kind of fits with my theme of that the farther west and northwest you go, that's where your likelihood of being drier than average is probably going to max out. And that trend really shuts off, at least as far as the tropics go, in October. You see all of Texas is likely drier than average. New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, even on up into the northern plains is not looking all that great during the month of October. So this type of forecast, precipitation-wise, has a very La Nina-like feel to it. So whether or not we see a La Nina develop or not, the Euro model here is kind of forecasting a very La Nina-like feel in terms of rainfall anomalies during that time. So much so it even lights up the Pacific Northwest in October. That is also a very La Nina-like feel. Let's look at the temperature forecast. No big surprises here, so I'm going to run through this fairly quickly. We'll likely see warmer than average conditions through much of the country during the month of August. Warmer than average conditions persist through basically the entire country, excuse me, during the month of September. And that doesn't change a great deal, even into the month of October, although those bigger warm anomalies kind of set up shop a little farther west in the Four Corner states. And we see a little bit of a cool down showing up in the Pacific Northwest. But bottom line, you see what we're looking at in terms of temperature. The interesting thing about the NMME forecast okay, is that it has backed off on some of those stout dry anomalies across West Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, into Kansas. Okay, and what it's done is kind of replaced a more average to slightly drier than average feel to it for the month of August. August in Southeast Texas, as I mentioned, like the wetter than average conditions there, likely tied to the hurricane development or tropical storm development. For September, lingering tropical effects down along the Rio Grande Valley and along the Texas Gulf Coast. Other than that, the NMME is painting average to maybe slightly drier than average conditions across Kansas, Oklahoma, most of Texas, and New Mexico. If we look at October, some of those dry anomalies start to expand a little bit. Southwest Kansas, the panhandles of Oklahoma and Texas, southeast Colorado, eastern New Mexico. The tropics, for the most part, shut off. So you see those green anomalies pretty much gone away across south central and southeast Texas during that time frame. In terms of temperature for the MME, it's going to be basically the same as the Euro seasonal model. You're likely going to see warmer than average conditions dominate, especially the western half of the United States for the month of August. That is going to continue during the month of September. You see in south central and southwest Texas, maybe that warm anomaly is a little bit lesser. If we can have more clouds and rainfall come in for some tropical stuff right there. And if we look at October, it's much the same, still warmer than average during that whole time set. So as I said, the interesting thing between the two models is that while the Euro has backed off on the La Nina conditions, it still projects a very La Nina-like feel in terms of temperature and rainfall. The NMME model still has full-blown La Nina conditions, but it has backed off on the dryness that it was forecasting before. So that's why I'm saying we have some conflicting information here. I would say the way to go with this, as I've been saying through much of this video, is that the farther west and northwest you live, the drier you're probably going to end up. The farther east and southeast you go, likely the wetter you're going to end up. Everybody is likely going to see warmer than average conditions during that time. And I think that that's something that I hope to resolve when I talk to you again in August, as we should, as we wrap up summer and gradually work our way into the upcoming seasonal change and as we go into fall. As I always say, that's my email. That's my phone number. If you have questions or comments about this information and about the forecast, please reach out to me because I want this to be valuable to you, but also actionable for you. And if you have questions about my gut feeling or kind of my confidence level on certain things, I think those are important questions to ask. So please always feel free to reach out to me. If I don't hear from you again, I will be chatting with you again soon, come to August. Be well, folks.